Good morning, or afternoon, whatever time someone wrote that on my paper. You know, I might want to check that, but
You're right, I can confirm that. There we go.
Here it is, right here.
Exhibit A.
All right, KC-SPAN. Regardless, glad you're here. Want to welcome you to the Economic Opportunities Subcommittee hearing today entitled A Review of VA's Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. Today, the subcommittee will conduct an oversight hearing of the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program at the Department of Veterans Affairs, a program designed to help our severely wounded and disabled veterans by helping them find meaningful employment and to maximize their independent living. Every day, VRNE master's level counselors work diligently with veterans in the program to help them create a rehabilitation plan and execute that plan while also being a constant resource and source of support for the participant as they go through their individualized rehab program. I agree with those who have said that the VRNE program should be the crown jewel of benefits provided to veterans through the Veterans Benefit Administration. This program is more than just a benefits program. It's also a vital first step for disabled veterans to become more financially independent, which is a win-win for the veteran and the taxpayer alike. For several years now, we've seen the participation in VRNE increase, and the President's latest budget submission anticipated a 12% increase of veterans participating in the program in FY19 compared to FY17. And as VBA continues to move through the current disability claims backlog, it would seem logical that these participation numbers are actually low, the 12%, that is, we think it will rise even more. However, despite the increase in the caseload numbers, it is concerning that once again the budget is flatlined counselors. This subcommittee has continued to sound the alarm on this issue, and I'm worried that our concerns seem to have fallen or are falling on deaf ears. Another topic that seems to be falling on deaf ears is oversight of the new case management system for tracking VRNE participants. This is the IT system for managing caseload. This system was supposed to finally bring VRNE into the 21st century and eliminate participants' paper-based files, believe it or not, that can be lost, damaged, or hamper counselor efficiency. After years of waiting, in 2015, VRNE was given the green light to begin working with VA IT staff on a replacement for the current case management program that has been in place since 1997. Lots of change since 1997. After almost 3 years of work and hundreds of man-hours, $6.5 million paid to a contractor and another $5.5 million lost in VA staff time and resources, the case management tool is not complete, and it appears that the VA is now considering scrapping the system altogether. $12 million, taxpayer money. This subcommittee was first alerted to this problem not in December when the system was first flagged as challenged by senior leaders, but only last week in anticipation of the hearing. While we certainly appreciate being briefed on this problem, we have since learned that the project has gone through 4 project managers, and it's still unclear if VA plans to start over and use a commercial off-the-shelf program that is used by state Voc Rehab offices in over 40 states, or try to salvage the existing program. It is clear that this project has gone off the rails due to a number of issues, not the least of which is the breakdown in communication between VRNE and their policy staff and the IT team. It appears that the IT staff did not appropriately explain, and we'll certainly dig into this to verify, but did not appropriately explain to VRNE staff the type of business requirements they needed from them to appropriately build the system, and VRNE staff didn't know when to raise their hand and ask how and when the system should be built. So the IT development continued to plug along, wasting millions of dollars with little to no oversight by senior IT and VA leaders. At least that's what it looks like from this vantage point. This lack of prioritization, making VRNE important and demonstrating the importance by the senior leaders of the VA seems to be on full display in this particular glitch, but there are plenty of other areas, I think, that beg the question, is VRNE a priority or not? To the best of my knowledge, no one associated with either these IT failures has been held accountable, so that's another line of questions I hope we get into today. What has been done? $12 million wasted. Who's accountable? If too many people are accountable, probably nobody's accountable. That's generally what I hear when I ask that question. So be prepared for that. Only in government do we continue to allow these types of failures to occur without accountability. Seems like the only disciplinary action I see is people being moved from one office to the next. Although we've empowered the VA with this accountability tool, and I think some of that is being used, but I think we need to use it all the more. I can only think of all the veterans that could have been helped if this money wasn't wasted, where we could invest $12 million and how we could better serve our heroes. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Kramer, more importantly, Mr. Thrower, for an accounting of these failures and the way forward on this system and what concrete steps can be taken to ensure these failures never happen again. With that, I recognize Ranking Member Mr. O'Rourke, my friend from Texas, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and your staff and the minority staff for preparing us for this hearing. The witnesses who are about to testify today, very much looking forward to hearing from the VA and better understanding this program and its performance and what we can look forward to in the months and years to come, and how we together are going to ensure that there's proper oversight and, to use the chairman's word, accountability for the performance of the VA and our ability to deliver value for the veterans who put their lives on the line for this country. Very much looking forward to hearing from the veteran service organizations, their feedback, perhaps your guidance and direction on how we can meet the task before us. But I think, and I don't know if Mr. Takano and Mr. Bilirakis feel the same, but I've been on this committee now for 5.5 years, and some of what I have learned that we're going to hear in greater detail is very dispiriting and disappointing. And I think as we try to foster a culture of accountability and excellence for the delivery of care and earned benefits to veterans, to see this kind of money wasted, this lack of performance, it just undermines veterans and their family members' faith in the VA. And Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we are without a VA secretary. And this is a bipartisan problem that we've seen in successive administrations of the VA not being enough of a priority. I think this is the 6th successive VA secretary with whom I've worked, the interim secretary, in the 6 years that I've been here, from Shinseki, through Sloan Gibson, through Robert McDonald, through David Shulkin, to the interim secretary, and we still await leadership for the 2nd largest department in the federal bureaucracy, the one that has the most sacred and solemn mission that I can think of. If any of us, Republican, Democrat, President, member of Congress, really care about our veterans, we're going to make this a priority, because I don't think that, well, we'll find out. I don't know that we're going to get true accountability and leadership and direction just from those who are testifying today. It's got to come from the top and from all of us. So anyhow, I'm committed, as I know you are and the other members of the committee, to working on this, but I got to say some of this is on me. I've been here 5.5 years, and that we still have these kind of failings. It's very, very disappointing. But I want to make sure that we're working constructively towards getting better. I'm looking forward to hearing ideas on how we can do that. Yeah, we've got to do better than what we're doing now. Thanks.
Well, I associate myself with your comments, and I'm not going to, we've got to let you guys talk, and we'll have our colleagues give them time to ask questions. But you're right. Without the continuity of leadership at the top, it's hard to present the full story of accountability, and it's hard to expect that we're driving that through the organization. We have governance responsibility and oversight, but the first line of defense is having the leadership, having those positions filled, having the quarterback in place, our VA secretary, and so I share your concerns on that. And I hope we can quickly fill them so we can provide not only the support that they need and the partnership that we need, but the accountability that I think is just devoid in too many places at the VA. So with that rosy picture, I'd like to thank the panelists again for being here today. Joining us is Mr. Jack Kammerer, not Kramer, as I misstated earlier, the Director of the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service at the VA, who is accompanied by Lloyd Thrower, the Deputy Chief Information Officer and the Benefits Account Manager of the Office of Information and Technology. We also have Ms. Heather Ansley, Acting Associate Executive Director of Government Relations. For Paralyzed Veterans of America, Ms. Cassandra Vangelo, Legal and Policy Fellow for Student Veterans of America, and Mr. Shane Learman, Assistant National Legislative Director for the Disabled American Veterans. All of your complete written statements will be made part of the hearing record, and each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes for your oral statement. Let's begin with you, Mr. Kammerer. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to appear again to discuss VA's Vocational Rehab and Employment Program. I'm accompanied by Mr. Lloyd Thrower from OINT, as you stated. We have continued our deliberate efforts to achieve our strategic goal of transforming VRE. VRE assists service members and veterans with service-connected disabilities and barriers to employment to prepare for, find, and maintain suitable employment. For veterans with service-connected disabilities so severe they cannot immediately consider employment, independent living services are offered to improve their ability to live independently. We employ nearly 1,000 vocational rehabilitation counselors and deliver services in a network of nearly 350 locations. Our service delivery model supports veterans where they're located and currently includes operations at 56 regional offices, 142 VRE outbased offices, 71 military installations, and 95 Vet Success on campus sites. Our team is committed to and engaged in multiple transformational initiatives. We remain focused on assisting veterans with service-connected disabilities in achieving employment and living independently, with over 132,000 veterans participating in 2017. We've seen an overall increase in applications, as you stated, as more adjudicated compensation claims result in more eligible VRE clients with service-connected disabilities. VRE Chapter 31 applicants grew 33% from 2013 to 2017, with a corresponding increase of 17% in participants. Most veterans in the program are on average in the program for 5 or more years. While our workload has grown, the counselor caseload has slowly declined as we achieve more positive outcomes, resolve older cases, and strive for active veteran participation. Currently, VRE has a rolling average of 133 veterans per counselor, down from 140 veterans per counselor at the end of 2016. I would highlight that there are other VRE staff members who work directly with the counselors assisting veterans in their goals. VBA just executed an organizational review focused on VRE staffing in order to help standardize operations across all ROs. We are actively looking at multiple methods, including technology, to enhance the time counselors are able to engage our veterans. We are also conducting an ongoing time study with the ultimate goal of improving counselor processes. In 2017, VRE counselors achieved 15,528 positive outcomes, up 8% from 2016. These included successfully rehabilitating 12,128 veterans, with 10,461 of those veterans achieving rehabilitation into employment, and 889 veterans with disabilities so severe they could not pursue employment but achieved rehabilitation through the delivery of independent living. With our team of VSOC counselors, we continue to leverage our partnership with schools across the country. In 2017, our counselors assisted over 43,000 veteran students. VRE has 9 new signed VSOC memorandums of understanding, and we're working to expand these new sites. VRE also closely collaborates with DoD to provide VRE services to active duty, reserve, and National Guard service members through the IDIS system, with nearly 145 counselors now at 71 installations. We appreciate the committee's long-term support to our wounded, ill, and injured service members. We continue to work on leveraging technology to increase efficiencies and service delivery. In collaboration with the Veterans Health Administration, we use technology to enhance services through online medical referrals and telecounseling. In 2015, we began VHA telecounseling technology. We're working to update that technology with the PICSIP application, which we'll begin piloting in June 2018. PICSIP is secure and mobile-friendly and eliminates the need for veterans to install specialized software. This updated technology will improve VRE's responsiveness to veterans' needs, reduce travel costs, and time for veterans and employees. VBA continues to work with our partners in OINT and other partners to find a viable solution to transfer VRE to an electronic case management system, as you stated. VBA, OINT, and our partners are conducting a needs assessment and exploring alternatives to determine the most cost-effective and efficient way to deliver a modern case management system. The goals of the case management system remain to deliver a digital paperless service delivery, better support veterans on their own terms, ensure better service delivery, and improve the counselor experience. Methods to develop and implement this effort will be evaluated once options are complete. VRE will continue to improve the delivery of vocational rehabilitation services to a most deserving population, that is our veterans with service-connected disabilities. Through the development of this new case management system, program performance measures that focus on veteran outcomes, clear accounting of both veteran progress and employment outcomes, and technologies, as I spoke about, such as telecounseling, we will continue to strive towards substantially improving and materially enhancing the VRE program. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement, and I would be pleased to answer your questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Ms. Ansley, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. Is it Ms. Ansley?
Yes, that's correct,
Okay.
sir. Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the subcommittee, Paralyzed Veterans of America would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational and Rehabilitation Program, or VRE. Until the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, in 1990, there were no widespread protections in federal law prohibiting disability-based discrimination in employment. PVA was a leader in advocating for the passage of the ADA because of the need to ensure equality of opportunity and access for all people with disabilities. Despite the ADA and other civil rights laws, too many people with disabilities, including disabled veterans, still encounter barriers to entering in or remaining in the workforce. The most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics survey found that approximately 42% of Gulf War-era veterans with service-connected disability ratings of 60% or higher are not in the workforce. VA's VRE program is critical to helping veterans with disabilities to benefit from the opportunities fostered by the ADA. Veterans who have acquired disabilities due to their military service that then create barriers to employment have earned every opportunity available to allow them to find success in employment. A strong VRE program is critical to the long-term success of our nation's efforts to help veterans with service-connected disabilities transition into employment following their service. Ensuring a proper counselor-to-veteran ratio in VRE's program has been a perennial issue because of the impact staffing deficiencies have on the successful administration of the program and ultimately how successfully the program serves veterans. Even experienced counselors need sufficient time to properly evaluate veterans who have significant yet manageable physical and mental health disabilities for services, collect needed information, and ultimately guide their veteran clients. While managing a caseload, the vocational counselor also needs to remain up to date on training programs and what is happening in today's workforce. All these tasks are important functions of the job. In light of all these duties, it is important that a counselor maintains a balanced caseload. Veterans come into the vocational rehabilitation system with some or many barriers to employment due to their one or many disabilities. If the proportion of veteran clients who have significant barriers to employment is too great, then it may be tough for one counselor to properly manage the standard of 125 cases at a time. In January of 2014, the Government Accountability Office issued a report calling on VA's VRE program to implement performance and workload management improvements. At that time, caseloads for VRE case managers ranged up to 1 to 139. According to VA, the average counselor ratio to veteran caseload ratio is approximately now 1 to 133. The independent budget, or IB, that was co-authored by the Disabled American Veterans, PVA, and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, has continually highlighted the need for additional VRE personnel to improve the program's effectiveness. Our most recent budget recommendation recommended an $18 million increase for VRE over the estimated then FY 2018 appropriations. This funding would allow VA to hire an additional 143 full-time employees, and we believe the vast majority of these new employees should be VRE counselors. Increased VRE staffing is needed due to the imbalance between the increasing number of veterans participating in the program and the number of employees available to serve them. In the last 4 years, participation in the program has increased approximately 16.8%. Personnel, however, have not seen anywhere near that same increase. With program participation estimated to increase once again in the next fiscal year, personnel will continue to feel constrained to provide the services that veterans, particularly those with significant barriers to employment, need to be successful. Providing VRE with additional resources to decrease the counselor-to-veteran ratio is an important step toward ensuring the program is meeting veterans' needs. VRE must also, however, reduce bureaucratic hurdles that delay veterans in moving through their vocational rehabilitation process. In addition, VRE must continue to deploy technology where appropriate to facilitate interaction with veteran clients and reduce the administrative burden on counselors. VRE's piloted effort to use technology to facilitate the entitlement process by using telecounseling was a step in the right direction. Further implementation of electronic processes to facilitate participation by veterans, particularly those with catastrophic disabilities, and reduce administrative burdens on VRE personnel has the potential to boost the program's success while allowing VA to more efficiently use the resources it has available. The services available to veterans with service-connected disabilities through VA's VRE program are vital to their ability to successfully return to work after acquiring what is in some cases a catastrophic disability. Additional investment in this program, along with a reduction of administrative delays and increased use of technology, is key to ensuring that counselors are able to use the tools needed to help these veterans obtain and retain competitive employment in their communities. PVA thanks you for the opportunity to express our views, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ansley. Now we yield 5 minutes to Ms. Vangelo.
Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to submit our testimony on the important Economic Opportunity Program, Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment, or VRE. With more than 1,500 chapters representing the more than 1.1 million students in schools across the country, we are pleased to share the perspective of those directly impacted by this committee's work. In recent years, we've collected stakeholder feedback on VRE. Specifically, we performed a deep dive analysis during the past 5 months. Such analysis included obtaining feedback from our constituents. I want to begin by emphasizing the importance of VRE. We acknowledge many successful rehabilitations and the growth of the Vet Success on Campus program. As you can see from our written testimony, we want to spend our time highlighting program issues as well as supplying solutions, both short-term and strategic. 3 problem areas include counselor quality and number, program training, and VRE's organizational control structure. First, counselor quality is a predominant issue our students cite. Quality is suffering as counselors strain under ever-increasing workloads. Public Law 114-223 requires a ratio of 1 counselor for every 125 veterans in the program. The average counselor ratio was 136.4 in 2017. Yet, VA consistently does not request additional full-time employees to address this ratio problem. Service is suffering and our veterans are paying the price. Robert A. asserts, fewer veterans need to be assigned to a specific counselor so that it does not take an act of Congress to get them to at least email you back. Second, program training raises many red flags. While we acknowledge the requirements for a master's level education and other required coursework, a diploma does not equate to VRE track knowledge. Counselors would benefit from track-specific training. Receiving training about entrepreneurship and changing academic requirements and demands would contribute to positive outcomes, both in terms of program satisfaction and successful rehabilitation. As Logan B. says, it feels like I'm fighting tooth and nail to take the self-employment route. I wish they would be more open to me making my own choices instead of trying to put me on whatever track is easiest. Third, VRE control and ownership impedes its success. While VRE is responsible for policy and procedure implementation, the Office of Field Operations maintains oversight, responsibility, and management. This division of responsibility and authority is ineffective. All of the policy guidance in the world does not address the root issue. VRE does not have control over individual counselors. Catherine S. highlights, if a veteran does not follow through with his or her responsibility, the veteran is removed from the program. If the counselor does not follow through, there is no action taken. After identifying barriers to success, I want to shift the conversation to solutions. In the short term, 2 immediate recommendations relate to expectation management and subsistence allowances. Many VRE challenges arise based on unclear expectations about what the program does and does not do. Revamping how VRE is publicized through consistent and coherent messaging would be a major step forward. Subsistence allowances cause stress for many program participants. Dean Z, a VRE participant here in DC, illustrates the point when he says, I've had to take out loans to pay for housing because I could not afford to live in the local area. Program participants should not have to choose between pursuing education and training and putting food on the table. Providing parity with the post-9/11 GI Bill rates would be a good start. With regard to our strategic recommendations, I want to focus on the VA Economic Opportunity Administration and Authority restructuring. This fourth administration at VA will provide EO programs like VRNE with the champion these programs need and deserve. We are proud to support the Vet Op Act of 2018 introduced by subcommittee members Brad Wenstrup and Mark Takano. While Director of Policy Lauren Augustine will testify on this legislation next week, I want to emphasize how this change provides for greater accountability without expanding the government footprint. The VRNE office must be given responsibility and authority over counselors and personnel administering the program. Redistribution of this authority will enable effective personnel allocation to each regional office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the subcommittee for making the success of transitioning service members, veterans, and their families a top priority in this Congress. I look forward to your questions about this critical transition and empowerment program.
Thank you, Ms. Vangelo. Mr. Learman, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of DAV, we thank you for the opportunity to present our recommendations on VA's Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. We represent over 1 million veterans and survivors, making DAV the largest veteran service organization providing claims assistance. Our mission includes the principle that this nation's first duty to veterans is the rehabilitation and welfare of its wartime disabled. To fulfill our mission, DAV directly employs a nationwide corps of more than 260 National Service Officers. Like all DAV National Service Officers, I myself received services through Voc Rehab when I started my career with DAV. So not only am I a successful outcome of Voc Rehab, but as a DAV NSO and a supervisor, I have personally assisted over 15 DAV apprentices and hundreds of veterans with Voc Rehab, to include applications, meeting with their counselors, and representation in their appeals at VA regional offices and the Board of Veterans' Appeals. Voc Rehab is a unique employment program that combines training, education services, and specialty needs to include equipment and services, all customized to each veteran to overcome their own disabilities. The Voc Rehab Longitudinal Study Annual Report for fiscal year 2016 notes, on average, participants have a higher service-connected disability rating than the overall veteran population, thus indicating the program is benefiting those with serious employment handicaps. The most significant finding of the study to date is veterans who have achieved rehabilitation have substantially better employment and standard of living outcomes than those who discontinued services in the program. Those who achieved rehabilitation have a median annual income that is $15,000 a year higher than those who discontinued services, dramatically demonstrating its successful outcomes for the veteran population Voc Rehab serves. The study also reveals that roughly 90% of veterans have a moderately to highly satisfying experience with Voc Rehab. Mr. Chairman, notwithstanding the successes of veterans participating in Voc Rehab, in our written testimony, we provided several recommendations, and now I will just highlight a few. First, for the past 3 years, VA has not requested new personnel for Voc Rehab. Based on the administration's proposed budget for fiscal year 2019, they indicate the current rolling average ratio of counselor to client is 1 to 136. In order to achieve the 1 to 125 counselor to client ratio established by public law, we estimate that they will need another 143 full-time employees for fiscal year 2019 for a total direct workforce of 1,585. Second, we believe that leveraging technology can improve efficiency of counselors. For example, Voc Rehab requires regular face-to-face interactions with veterans to deliver benefits and services. And unfortunately, half do not show for these appointments. Two pieces of technology can improve the appearance rate. One, the use of electronic or text appointment reminder system, and the other is a telecounseling network. Both would allow veterans to receive reminders of their appointments and receive their counseling from their own homes or schools while the time improving the efficiency of each Voc Rehab counselor. In order to realize the advantage of technology, Voc Rehab needs an increase in their IT resources. Third, we are encouraged by Voc Rehab's new competency-based training system that provides all newly employed counselors 80 hours of training. We suggest this training system can be used to provide uniformity and some standardization, since inconsistency between VA regional offices and counselors is common within Voc Rehab. At the same time, we urge them to use this training to ensure each counselor understands the flexibility they have to address the individualized needs of their veterans while remaining consistent within the overall Voc Rehab program. Finally, in recent years, there have been some suggestions that Voc Rehab should be scaled back by limiting the number of veterans who are eligible, and we note that restricting eligibility to Voc Rehab could potentially decrease the counselor-to-veteran client ratio. However, DAV will adamantly oppose any legislation or policies that would restrict existing eligibility criteria. As Voc Rehab is an employment program, any changes to eligibility will negatively impact disabled veterans' ability to obtain and maintain substantial gainful employment. Mr. Chairman, we thank you for the opportunity this afternoon, and this concludes my testimony. I am pleased to answer any questions you or members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lehrman. Again, appreciate the panelists coming. I'm going to yield 5 minutes to myself for questions, and then we'll move over to the ranking member. Mr. Kammerer, tell me, there could be debate about what the ratio is. I understand in some appropriations bill, it's the ratio, the appropriate maximum ratio is 1 to 125, I think somebody mentioned. But I don't know when that was set. I don't know what science was behind that. I'm already suspect because it was set by Congress. But the proof should be in the outcome. The proof should be in your achievement. Tell me about the success rate, and give me a trend of your success rate over the last 3 years on employment rate, success rate, and independent living success rate. I'd like for you to be a little more clear with me on how do you define success with respect to the independent living component of your mission.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I would say I agree with you on the caseload. The number 125 to 1 would be an appropriations language from several years ago, but I believe the 125 to 1, to my knowledge, when I took over the program in 2013, 2014, came from a study or review 10 years ago informally of state vocational rehab programs.
A lot of changes in technology, a lot of new tools since then.
Absolutely.
My point is, it may not be arbitrary, but forget the ratios.
Moving forward.
Just tell me what your outcomes have been.
Right.
Your success rate on employment and on independent, the sort of independent living side of your mission. Over the last 3 years, are we going up in terms of improvement on employment rate and independent living? Or are we going down? So
I'll give you the overall trend. We started new performance measures in 2015 where we went to positive outcomes. In 2016, for the first time, we reported to Congress a national success rate, Mr. Chairman. That was the number of veterans that achieved a positive outcome at their 6th year in the program, since GAO found that we were a 5 to 6 year program. So in 2016, we had 48% of the 6-year group that were successful at their 6th year. 48% of them were, 47% of them were successful outcomes, and then 72% of them, including those successful outcomes, were still in the program. So we
successful outcomes to move to independent living, or
those included the employment rehabilitations, the independent living rehabilitations.
So can you bifurcate the two? Can you just tell me what the outcomes were for employment first and then independent living second? Right now,
yes, I can.
What you said right now is less than half after 6 years were successful. Is
That's correct. And then last year, Mr. Chairman, we went to 48% were successful, positive outcomes. And then
what was that percentage again?
48%. So the first year we measured it, 47% were in the program successfully completed at their 6th year, and then 72% were persisting or had been a positive outcome. The following year, last year, the second year we reported that overall number, it was 48% achieved a positive outcome, and then 68% including those positive outcomes, were still persisting. So I read the numbers to you in my statement on positive outcomes. Last year, they went up 8% from the previous year. Every year, I think and I'll get you the detailed numbers for the record, every year for the last 3 years, sir, of the individual employment, independent living, and maximum rehab gains. But our program has performed, in my view as the director, very well. Our performance continues to increase every year in terms of the positive outcomes. So last year, as I said in my statement, we're up 8%. So I believe it would be my assessment as the director that we are performing at a level based on the success after that 6th year, which again, on average, our veterans 5 to 6 years. If nearly half of them, sir, are positive outcomes at the 6th year, and nearly 70% are still persisting, I feel as the director that those are positive measures, sir.
And why do you feel that way? Do you have something to compare it to, or?
I think that we have the right
'Cause
performance
if I got my
Yes.
my votes right half the time, I'd be fired. I mean, my district would fire me.
I understand your concern. Maybe I could explain it in a different way.
I'm out of time. I really wanted to start with just getting some idea of what success looks like and whether you're moving in the right direction or not in spite of the caseload increase. We're probably going to have multiple rounds as long as my colleagues want to stay. I'm going to stay and ask more questions, but right now I'm going to defer and yield 5 minutes to my ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I realize that the comments I made at the opening of this hearing might have been out of context. I was referring to something that I had just learned today, which is that the case management system for this program is managed on paper right now, and that there was an effort undertaken to move that into a digital system. I guess developing our own software, we've spent $12 million, and I think it has been a failure by all accounts. And I was hoping that in your opening remarks you were going to at least account for that or tell us where you are or why that happened, because I think it touches on some of the points that some of the veteran service organizations have brought up. If we have challenges with ratios, with training, with outcomes, and we want to be able to shift resources where they're most effective, I would think moving off of a 19th century system to make sure that we're leveraging technology to its fullest capacity to help us to do that is essential. So tell me, if you could just take a minute, because I only have 5 minutes total, could you just tell me what happened and what you're going to do going forward?
I understand your concern about the case management system. I'll pass to my colleague. We started this journey in 2014 with the business requirements. We evolved the system for 2 years, extended it for a 3rd year after the requirements were accepted. The software that we showed to our leadership team in the field in St. Paul last year, Ranking Member O'Rourke, looked good. And we identified in January when the application was fielded, there were challenges with that, that we perhaps were not on course, and I worked with my IT partner. I'll let my IT partner finish this.
And Mr. Thrower, before you begin, I just want to make sure that I'm not misleading anyone who's watching this or my colleagues on the committee. Is it true that this began in 2015, that to date we spent $12 million and we still don't have an operable system?
Yes, sir. That is true.
Okay. Money down the toilet, something we can salvage from that? What's next? And please don't take more than a minute to answer that.
Okay. I will say that, as we've looked at this, I think we had some failures on a couple of points. In terms of our use of our development methodology, we did not appropriately use agile development methodology. We also didn't communicate sort of the downsides of not doing that appropriately to our customers. We're at a point now where we have an incomplete system. We made a lot of progress. We had 6 successful bill cycles up until we discovered that there was problems at the beginning of this year. We are now looking at a series of options. One of them is to finish the complete. We took the pause because we felt it was prudent at that point to really understand where we were and were we going to be able to complete this. We're now looking
Last question, when will this be complete and what will the total cost be to the taxpayer?
That we do not know.
Okay. Get back to us, please, when you do know. And I would argue that maybe we should stop digging until we have an answer on this and a budget set for it, or we're just going to, yeah, you're not inspiring confidence, not you personally, just this process so far and the explanation for it. To the chairman's question, I show that, and you reiterated this, Mr. Kammer, that FY 2016 VA reported a class success rate of 47% and a class persistence rate of 72%. I want to follow up on the chairman's question. What was the goal?
Originally, when we baselined it, I believe it was 60% and 70% as the goals. Then we re-baselined, that was the first year that you spoke of, Mr. O'Rourke. We re-baselined to 55% and 70% success and persistence.
So you were trying to get to 60%, you hit 47%.
The first year.
Then you dropped the goal down.
We dropped it
only
to
moved up a point.
55%. We didn't achieve that again the second time.
And so to the very good recommendations made by members of these veteran service organizations, is that attributable to counselor training and efficacy? Is it attributable to ratio? Why aren't you hitting your goal?
I think I perhaps didn't explain my answer right to Chairman Arrington, and I'll give you to try to give a better explanation. One of the challenges we have in the VRE program is veterans generally, and that's why I went to the cohort measure, sir, spend 5 to 6 years in our program, but some veterans spend longer in the program based on this extent of their disabilities.
That's the persistence rate.
Yes, sir. So if you stay in the program, it's a positive thing. But as Chairman Arrington said, I am driven to get the program outcomes. We need to get the veterans reemployed. So the challenge we have is our education is slightly different. It's up to 48 months. It can be extended beyond that if you have a serious employment handicap, and then generally 18 months, Mr. O'Rourke, for job services. Many veterans stay in longer, so we want to get them a successful outcome, but we need to take care of their disabilities.
Okay, and for the record, because I'm going to turn it back over to the chairman, I would like to know what the goal is for both of these measures for the next fiscal year, and I would like to know what the budget is for transitioning from a paper-based system to a digital system for the case management system, because I don't know what to measure $12 million against. Was it a $12 million budget and we spent it all? Is it a $24 million budget? How much are we on the line for? Don't answer now, get us in writing, and that way we can hold each other accountable, and I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. And we will get that information for him and for the rest of the committee, and appreciate his line of questions. Now yield Mr. Banks 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thrower, one of the options that I understand is now being explored by VRE and the IT staff is to purchase a commercial off-the-shelf system. You have mentioned to this committee staff that this system was not available, though, when the project was first scoped in 2015. Do you still stand by that today?
I would say that I actually do not know whether or not the solution was available at that time. I suspect there was early versions of it that were. I do not know whether or not it was at a maturity level that was to serve the mission. What I do know is that from what I can understand, I do not believe that the team at the time who was doing evaluation looked at a COTS product.
So you don't know?
I don't know.
Yet you led the committee staff to believe that there was not a commercial option available.
I don't think
You
I
dispute
led them
that.
to believe that in that way, but that could have been interpreted.
So if that's the case, if you didn't know if there was a commercial option available, then clearly you and your staff didn't do your due diligence in 2015. Or now, as the committee's research indicates that the first version of this system was created approximately 20 years ago and was being used in dozens of states in 2015. So how do you explain that?
I would agree with you that the team that did the initial analysis did not look appropriately at COTS products. I think that was a failing at the very beginning of the program.
Okay. You've summed up quite well your inability to find out whether or not there was a commercial option that was available. And I surely hope that you won't either be misleading to us now or incapable of doing your job well by figuring out the answer to that question as it stands today. So can you explain to me, since you didn't know then and you don't know now, can you further explain about the steps that you and your staff are taking to correct this colossal mistake?
So we discovered this problem, well, the first inkling that we had a problem was in December, when there was a user acceptance test that had failed, that did not pass all standards. That looked to the team at the time as a glitch. We did not really actually realize that it was potentially a real problem until mid-January when we were looking at the fact that there was considerably more requirements than we expected at that point, which should have been a farther down path. We should have been very close to completion. We called a pause, or we asked for an assessment at that point. In mid-February, we caused a pause. Now we're looking at options of what is the best way to go forward, both from a financial perspective and from a timing perspective, to deliver the best solution for our veterans. We're looking at several options. One is to see what it would cost to understand how to blow out to finish what we've started. Another option is to look in the commercial COTS environment to see if that is a more expeditious and cost-effective solution. The third is to sort of a hybrid on that and really kind of see if there is a managed service solution that could be dealt with that. So we're in the midst of doing an analysis of those options. We committed to, I think we, being the collective VBA and OINT team, committed to bringing a recommendation to the leadership of VBA at the beginning of June so that VBA leadership can make a decision during the month of June. That's the best way forward.
Well, thank you for those answers. Mr. Chairman, I find this situation to be thoroughly disappointing and confusing. Nonetheless, but with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. When I now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Correa.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments from Mr. Banks. Mr. Thrower, it sounds like you're going to have some options for us or the department in the next couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Any thoughts where we'd be going? Any thoughts on some commercial applications? Or let me restate that question. Do you think there's any way to implement a system in a timely basis that has a long-term horizon, as opposed to, these are my words, putting a Band-Aid on what's going on right now and moving forward?
Our goal is to come up with the best solution, and it's not looking at, we're not looking at.
And I'm not, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Coming up with the best solution to do what?
We're looking for the best solution to meet the business requirement has been defined by our customer, by Mr. Cameron, and by the VBA, and the Vocational Rehabilitation team. So whether or not, at this point, I look at it as Mr. O'Rourke said earlier, is we have sunk a certain amount of cost in here. That happened. Okay, I am now looking at, can I leverage that? Or the team who is evaluating this is saying, can we leverage this? Does it make sense to finish this? Will this best meet the need of our veterans, or are we better served?
At this point, at this point, sir, are there any commercial vendors out there that would possibly off-the-shelf programs that would meet the needs, or is it so specific that unlikely?
There is a commercial vendor that we know about that is a potential that we're looking at as an option.
Thank you. Let me shift very quickly gears here. The Vocational Rehab and Employment Program, supposed to get our veterans up and running, integrated into our society. I've got a constituent, Aaron Edwards, who goes to my alma mater, Cal State Fullerton. Single father, 2 kids, trying to get himself up, but he's got to take care of his kids as well. A question to the group. I've introduced legislation called the Veteran Employment Childcare Access Act that essentially would cover child care assistance of veterans who are participating in training and workforce. Any thoughts?
Jack Cameron representing VRE, sir. I would say on a case-by-case basis, we do have a limited ability to provide some degree of child care support
at this point
in our program, but it's case-by-case, and it's not, I wouldn't describe it as robust, and we have some ability.
Very quickly, I'm running out of time. Is it not robust because that's providing child care something you don't consider important, or it's just something that you don't see as a need out there?
I'll take it for the record, but my short answer is I believe it's based on statutory authority. We're able to provide some limited
So you comply with statutory authority then? And
I'll take it for the record, sir, but I believe that would be my...
my third question, very quickly, on the ratio of counselors to veterans. Los Angeles Regional Office, that covers my area, Orange County. The ratio right now is, I believe, 225 to 1. And I guess I'm going to come back and ask the question different than our chairman, but related. You got a ratio, you've got personnel, you got folks that have to wait. I guess my question is, what's an appropriate ratio of counselors to veterans?
As I was stating to Mr. Arrington, I'm trying to move beyond the ratios as they've evolved over many years to a more time-driven model to determine, can we measure the number of minutes that a counselor is able to counsel a veteran a week. So in rough order of magnitude now, my math tells me it's about 12 minutes or so that a counselor is able to spend on average with a veteran per week. We'd like to give more time back to the counselors.
So we're probably going to need to hire more counselors to do the job?
There's a number of ways we can do that. We have a time study going on right now. Some of the technology ways that we're looking at, including telecounseling, the Dragon software we're getting ready to give to the counselors to dictate their case notes. There's a range of things we can do to give time back to the counselors. We have an admin hub study going on in San Diego to see if we can get school payments done for the counselors. So there's a range of things, sir, that we can do.
And you are doing them right now?
Yes, we are, and I would highlight also our caseload in Los Angeles is one of our highest.
Yes, it is.
I've actually sent some of my team members out to LA to help in the past year with applications. They've had a turnover. They've had a number of things there. That has been on
Very
on my
quickly,
radar.
are you implementing telecounseling in LA?
We will. We're getting ready to, this year we'll do a national rollout of the new system. They
When?
currently have the old system, but we will help Los Angeles as well with the new
When
telecounseling.
do you think you'll have that?
We're rolling out the initial capability in the next 30 days. I will get it to Los Angeles by the end of the year, sir.
Mr. Chair, I yield. I'd like to continue to talk to you on this issue. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If you stick around, we'll have another round of questions. If you have to leave, we understand, and whatever information you need from the panelists, I'll make sure you get it. Thank you, Mr. Correa. Now we yield 5 minutes to Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to know if Mr. Kammerer would agree with this statement. The most efficient action VR&E can take to bring about better outcomes is to have the flexibility to shift cases from counselors who are overburdened to counselors who are underworked in more remote areas of the country. That's of the things we can do right now, that's the most efficient thing you can do. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I agree in principle. I'm challenged in practice with that. And to answer your question quickly, Mr. Takano, as you know, in compensation claims, we're able to broker cases through the national work queue across the country and work. We currently, 3 reasons. We still have paper in VRE in some cases.
If I may cut in, but you basically agree that that's the most efficient thing we can do, and the barrier is the paper system, the breakdown with the electronic system you were trying to build. Is that right? I just want to put this.
No,
I
don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's a very complex issue. But the short answer is I agree with you in principle. Other than the technology and the paper challenges, sir, employment is a lot of times locally derived. So there are employment challenges when you move cases around, and veterans are very adamant about wanting to retain their counselors. So when we talk about moving workload around the country, it's very complicated for us.
I understand that there's a need for continuity. If I were a disabled veteran, I would want to make sure that the counselor who knew me was the one that stayed with me, and I would prefer the face-to-face interaction with a local counselor. But as a matter of trying to untangle what we have now, I mean, optimally, it would be an optimal situation would be that we have a local counselor working face-to-face with our disabled veterans. But as for managing the caseload now and getting to stability, it seems to me that we have to allocate the workload remotely. And what's in the way of that is this electronic the breakdowns with the electronic system. And I think we need to make that clear for the folks who are watching this hearing to understand why we are bearing down on why there are so many questions from my colleagues about the electronic system. Is that it's part of the solution to getting to it a better work allocation.
Absolutely, sir. And I will say as clearly as I can state it, our counselors deserve and need a new case management system. It's unacceptable that we don't have it. And that technology will help us do what you're talking about.
And I believe my ranking member especially has some background on IT, and that the chairman is familiar with some of the business systems, and that we're going to get to the bottom and get to the accountability necessary for that. But I want to get to some of the other things that we can do to improve this, the VRNE going forward. I understand it's hard for VRNE to increase the overall number of counselors because counselors all must have master's degrees and be highly qualified. Is that correct?
100% of our assigned counselors have master's degrees. That's correct.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's a complex job to be a counselor and to make those judgments and to work with this population group, with our disabled veterans. So do we have incentive programs? Do we have loan repayment? Are there programs to be able to help us build that pipeline of people to do these jobs? Do we have adequate, is there a need to do that?
As you know, Mr. Takano, I'm not a counselor myself, but I'm responsible for the professionals that are. Generally, in my experience in 4.5 years, we attract and retain counselors because counselors want to come to the VA to serve veterans. There are things we can do to make sure, like right now we're short at least 30 counselors.
Yes.
So we need to hire up to ceiling. And then we need to look at opportunities. I told you earlier we did a staffing review. We're looking at more standardization across the regional offices, which the committee and others have brought to my attention in terms of service delivery. We might be able to generate some more counselors as part of that effort as well.
And I understand that you're conducting a time study to see how much time counselors spend on individual tasks so you can figure out ways to make the process more efficient. You have a goal to contract out the evaluation and administrative duties of your counselors so that they can spend more time actually counseling veterans. I heard that, so you're increasing your telecommunication, your telecounseling functions so you can minimize missed appointments and that sort of thing. But it seems to me that, the immediate thing before us is to get the IT thing straightened out so we can at least reallocate the caseloads. But we need to hire more counselors, and we need to find ways to get them trained.
And I'll make my response in this real short, but as the committee knows, we also have contract augmentation to our counselors for assessments and other tasks. My leadership has clearly communicated to me that we need to use that to the best advantage. We used 78% of about $4 million last year to support our counselors in our national service contracts, and I'll get the committee more information on that utilization.
All right. Well, I too wish to echo the sentiments of my ranking member that I hope you get this right. I mean, this is a very, very important group of veterans that we need to make sure we serve to the utmost. And I know that that you are aligned behind that purpose, and I hope we can get to the bottom of all this IT mess.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Takano. I yield 5 minutes to myself. Let me follow along the line of questioning of Mr. Takano. What are the comps in terms of what a Voc Rehab counselor is paid in the private sector versus the ones, or the salary, average salary you pay Voc Rehab counselors at the VA?
That's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman. I'll have to take that for the record. I understand it. I don't have those numbers, but I will get those numbers for you.
There are Voc Rehab counselors, and this type of service you provide does exist in the private sector outside the VA?
The service contracts I told you about, there are contract, we don't have one-for-one contract counselors, but we're augmented by vocational rehab counselors every state, and I work with my partners, Mr. Arrington, at the Department of Education Rehab Service Administration. They manage the state workload through the state rehabilitation counselors, so all the states have counselors, and there are nonprofit counselors as well, and I work with the VSO's partners as well.
Do they have, these counselors have a disabled population as clients? I assume I'm trying to get an apples to apples comparison so we can get
It
at
wouldn't
the
be-
question of the ranking member, which is, what's a good goal? I mean, I'm not saying 100% is feasible or realistic or even 80%, but we've got to have something to compare it to other than ourselves, or your operation over the last 2-3 years, which seems like that's the only data we have to work with. So do you think that exists in the marketplace where we could ascertain that data so we could have some comps to know how far off the mark we are?
We have tried with limited success to get state information in terms of how the states do it, and I will try again because I believe that's an excellent measure to try to gauge how the states do their business. One of the challenges, sir, as you pointed out, is they're not all veteran clients. So we are rather unique in terms of the fact that we serve veterans. I do have a counterpart in VHA, the compensated work therapy, but that's a clinical program. So we'll work with you, sir, to get you more information.
Thank you. I took notes and took note of one of the criticisms by the panelists that VR&E does not have control over their counselors, and that there's a sense of not having accountability in terms of meeting with the clients, following up with the clients, being timely, quality of services. Do you get that impression? Do you have quality controls in place? Are you managing that where you can identify those counselors and the places where there are problems and then addressing them? Do you have systems in place for that?
That's an excellent question, sir. I have direct responsibility for quality assurance at the national level. I have a staff of essentially 10, one leader and 9 folks in Nashville, Tennessee that do that for me. They do the national. The local quality is done, as you stated, by the local leaders. Those are the VRA leaders. The chain of command goes through the Office of Field Operations, so the counselors do not directly report to me. I manage the quality. I do some of the internal controls, but I work very closely with the Office of Field Operations. I spent many hours last week with the district directors talking about VRE type issues. So your point is well taken. It's a partnership right now between me and the Office of Field Operations and the chain of command in terms of the chain of command for the counselors.
Who do you report to in the central office at the VA?
Mr. Rob Reynolds, the Deputy Undersecretary for Disability Compensation, is acting as the Deputy Undersecretary for the Office of Economic Opportunity. He's my direct report.
How long has he been in that role?
I think he's been in that role at least over, I would say at least a year.
So
he's been the acting since Deputy Undersecretary Coy departed in December.
I've got too many questions, and I really want to get to the systems breakdown. And $12 million we've already established, and I appreciate your honesty. It was a big waste of time and money, taxpayer money, and I don't know how many counselors $12 million would add to the roster, but I'm certain it would be significant at getting after the increase in caseload. But let me ask you, Mr. Thrower, what disciplinary action has ensued since your leadership has been made aware that we've effectively wasted $12 million on this project?
I cannot say that there's been any specific disciplinary action. We're actually still we're still diving in to understand exactly what the true situation is over the history. The key decisions that were made that I believe that took this program off track happened from the very inception. Just the fact that we did not follow our normal process, and then various communications issues that happened as a result of that.
Who's responsible for that?
Overall, the IT system development team is responsible for all delivery of software.
Should we fire the whole team? I mean, should the VA fire the whole team? I know I'm not supposed to ask that question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. I mean, is the team responsible? Are you responsible? Is there a CIO at the VA that's responsible? I've gone over my time, Mr. Ranking Member. I'm sorry. Nobody's ever responsible at the VA. Nobody. Everybody is, and then nobody is, and then we can't ever track down. And then I ask if there have been any disciplinary actions. Usually I ask who's been fired, and they've told me not to ask that. But then we don't get the information. If we do, nobody's been fired. I don't know any place in the world, any market, any sector of our economy, any industry, any private or public enterprise where $12 million is wasted. Somebody's job wasn't on the line. I don't imagine anybody's going to get fired, and that just frustrates the dog out of me. I just don't know what to do, except to keep grilling you. I may stay here all day. I may stay up here all day. I'll let the ranking member go, but I may just stay up here. We may do an all-nighter so we can call attention so the taxpayers know how they're getting rooked and how the veterans are being poorly served by the bureaucracy at the VA. I think there's a tremendous breakdown on the IT system side. Sorry I've gone over my time, Mr. Ranking Member. I'm going to yield to you, and then I'm going to keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I think there does have to be some accountability. And I think you could spend unlimited amounts of money and spend unlimited amounts of time developing the software if there isn't a defined budget and if there isn't a defined deadline. I think that you can have the same people committing the same mistakes if there isn't accountability. If you said that the typical or normal procedures were not followed, somebody chose not to follow them or made a mistake in not following them. Don't know if you know who that is, or if there is a lesson learned, or if there's been a message sent throughout the organization that spending $12 million and not having a result at the end of the day is not acceptable. We're not hearing it up here, and I don't think anyone watching it. And I think given the accountability issues in the VA, that would just be something I would expect you to be super sensitive to, and you're not for whatever reason. I have a question for the VSOs. Maybe if you could each take a minute in answering this. First of all, your testimony has been very helpful from Ms. Ansley talking about, let's add more full-time employees so that we get better ratios. Ms. Vangelo, you were able to recount some anecdotes about not getting an email return or not having the freedom to pursue, a direction that was going to be most beneficial to that veteran. I really liked, Mr. Learman, the study you cited showing $15,000 on average in higher income for those veterans who completed the VR&E program. That's something measurable. I mean, that's real value for the veteran, real value for the taxpayer. It's allowing somebody to contribute at a higher potential. So I just thought I'd ask each of you to take just 1 minute, if you might, because I don't know when we're going to meet again on this issue, and I'd love to have some guidance at the highest level for, you've described the means to get better outcomes. What should the chairman and I and our colleagues be measuring? Is it persistence? Do we care how long somebody stays in the program? Is it the success rate for these 5 different tracks that people are on? What do you, at the level that we're at, voting on 1,200 different bills in a year, only getting to have a VR&E hearing once a year, what do you want us at the highest level to be focusing on? Ms. Ansley, could you take a minute to just share your guidance with me?
Overall, I think it is important for the committee to be focused on accountability to ensure that we are seeing a difference. I testified 3 years ago at the last VR&E hearing, and unfortunately, still talking about a lot of the same things, and that's disappointing. So I feel like we need to really look at what changes are we making within the program, whether it's bureaucratic hurdles such as, how people get into the program, how they measure. PVA has a vocational rehabilitation program called PAVE. I spoke with some of our counselors about these very issues because they're serving PVA members who have catastrophic disabilities. And they talked about how they can quickly get into a medical center and start talking to somebody as soon as they acquire a disability. They can start talking to them about, yes, it is possible to return to work. They can quickly get the processes rolling, and how all of that is ultimately helpful to make sure that, particularly for people with catastrophic disabilities, they are not self-selecting themselves out of the workforce thinking that they can't work and that they're not even pursuing opportunities like VR&E. So we want to make sure that the message is given that work is an opportunity for you and that Congress is going to invest in this program to make the changes needed so that we are seeing not only higher success rates, but more veterans going into the program.
I like that, and one of the things I take from that is higher expectations. That the veterans are meeting because of a very successful VR&E program, higher expectations for the VA, higher expectations for the Committee of Oversight, and we all got to perform to them. And I think it's just, success will beget more success in that, but we've got to take these steps. Thank you. Ms. Vangelo, would you like to add a minute's worth to the conversation?
Sure, thank you for that question. And as you hit the nail on the head in terms of the outcome, something that we go into in more depth in our written testimony, how positive outcome is defined currently is very, very broad. And we think that, pursued academic outcome, what does that actually mean? It needs to be strictly defined. So in terms of going forward, we can measure that and find out how veterans are doing in this program in order to get them employed. And I think in order to make that successful, we really do have to focus on accountability and making sure that VRNE does have control over individual counselors. So if someone is not meeting the expectations to serve our veterans, they're no longer in that role. And I think that does come down from, having someone who oversees economic opportunity in the VA who, from that top down, can really make sure that the lines are clear and people are held to those tough standards for our veterans.
I know that SVA has been real consistent on advocating for somebody, reports directly to the secretary on this issue, and you're being consistent in that as well. And I appreciate that, and you're making a good case for it, right? That there's somebody who's accountable at the undersecretary level to make sure that we deliver. Mr. Learman, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the best ways to measure success for a disabled veteran is employment. Whether it takes them a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years to get there, the fact that they can come back, survive their disabilities, and have the ability to not only provide for themselves, but their families and their communities, will set off a feeling within them and the community that will just elevate everything even higher. So I think employment is probably the best outcome to look, is we should never give up on our disabled veterans and give them the means to find that employment, because as we indicated earlier, $15,000 a year higher in annual income for somebody who completes the program is amazing to me. It really is. So it really shows the value of the program, and I think substantial gainful employment should be what we're looking at as a successful outcome for any disabled veteran.
Yeah. Well, I'll close by thanking each of you, including our representatives from the VA, for the work that you're doing on this. It's an extraordinarily valuable program, and I just think that one of the consistent things we're hearing, each one of you mentioned the word accountability, is there just has to be better control for performance. We have to make sure that we're truly delivering highest value in each case, setting very high expectations, achieving them. And that's on us too. I want to make sure, to the point of adding another 143 employees, that we make the appropriations request if we think that the ratio is determinative. To Mr. Takano's point, having a system that can allocate resources where they need to go, that's not based on paper, but and making sure that we're accountable for delivering that system. All of that is helpful. So just want to thank you, and to Ms. Ansley especially for reminding us that you testified 3 years ago. I think it's a real challenge on this committee is we just don't want to continue to have the same conversation, because it's on all of us, and I really, in the time I have remaining here, want to see if I can work with the chairman to deliver on the guidance that you gave us. And we have some very direct questions for the record for Mr. Thrower and Mr. Cameron, and really look forward to getting your answers. And we want to work collaboratively with you to then build on that and make sure that next time Ms. Ansley's here, she's congratulating all of us on being able to deliver to the higher expectations that we've set. So thank you all for doing this. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling this hearing today.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I know you're trying to get me to wrap it up.
I may have to go.
No, you can leave at any time, and I won't keep you guys all night, but I do have a few more. It may be legal, but it may not be wise. Look, the ranking member and I are on the same page, and generally are. If it's resources you need, and that's what we believe would make the most impact to achieving the desired outcomes and helping our wounded warriors make the most of their lives and have a purpose-filled life and an impact in their communities and self-sufficiency and all those things, that's all we want. That's all we want. But if it's defining success better and having better performance metrics, if we're chasing the wrong thing in that regard, if it's authority you don't have, we have to just be clear so we can pursue that alongside of you. But I try to imagine what it would be like if a veteran, a disabled veteran, and potential client, if not client, were sitting in this chair, and my taxpayers from back in West Texas. That's why, and I think they'd just be beside themselves. I think they would just be incensed with the waste and the mismanagement. And I hear it. I was at an oversight hearing recently on an IT issue that had to do with logistics, management system, and it was $400 million of waste. So $12 million is just a drop in the bucket. But the cumulative loss in not managing IT at the VA is astronomical. And we keep giving more money and more money to the VA because we all want to help our veterans. But meanwhile, I think the taxpayers are being fleeced, and I think the VA is not serving the customer like they should in terms of our veterans. And so I'm gonna ask some more questions to you, Mr. Thrower. Who do you report to at the VA?
I report to the principal deputy CIO.
And the principal deputy, I suppose, reports to the CIO.
Yes, sir.
And who is the CIO?
We have an acting CIO right now.
So every time I've asked for the record, asked the question, who do you report to? Ultimately, it's somebody that's in an acting role.
Right.
How long has that person been in this role as acting CIO?
Approximately a month.
Okay. What happened to the last fellow?
He resigned.
On his own will?
That is my sense, yes.
Okay. So what is Central VA, the deputies or the acting CIO and deputy principal, what are they doing about this? Are they engaged in this? In terms of what's happened, doing a postmortem, making sure we have lessons learned, making sure we have appropriate accountability, making sure we have a plan on whether to pick up what we've sunk and try to make it work, or do we take something off the shelf? Are they engaged in that process?
Yes, sir, they are. I mean, I and the development teams have briefed them on what happened, our assessment of how it happened. We've gone through and tried to do, a lot of this is a lot of forensic work that I've been doing over the last couple of months to really understand how we got to where we are. And so our leadership is fully apprised of that, as is leadership of the Veterans Benefits Administration, because we've been briefing both parties. And we're working to understand both what is the path, the trail of accountability, and what we should do about it going forward, both from an accountability point of view, and more important, and to me, more importantly, of how are we going to deliver what we want to deliver for veterans.
Are you the captain of the team for the project?
No, sir.
Who is?
That would be within our development organization.
The IT development?
Yes.
And why isn't that person here at this hearing?
I have been the one who has been
Do
providing.
you report to him, or is he a
Separate chain of command.
Okay, so if the captain of the team is in a different chain of command, then I'd go back and tell him that's the last time you ever come to a hearing, and take the abuse that I'm going to continue to dish out when the person that I'm understanding by your comments who's accountable is in a different part of the IT organization. Is that correct?
That is a challenge. I will say, though, that I have, in the time that I have been in the role that I'm in, I serve the role of being the liaison between the Veterans Benefits Administration and OIT. And the types of conversations that I think did not happen at the beginning of this program, I am now in place to make sure they do happen.
So conversations between whom?
Between Mr. Kammerer, between the undersecretary, and the developer teams on our side of the fence. I broker the conversation.
Is Mr. Kammerer and the VRE, are they your client essentially?
Yes, sir.
So they're your client, and you have to understand what the client's needs are.
Yes, sir.
Did you serve your client, or did you fail your client in this regard?
I would say that we as an organization have failed our client in this regard.
When you say as an organization, I want to be specific. Who is that? Who's the organization that failed the client VRE and therefore failed the case managers to give them tools to be more efficient and therefore failed the disabled veterans who are receiving services? So who is the organization? Is it your team? Is it the guy that's not here who's actually responsible?
My sense in this case, I have been in this role, sir. The role that I'm in is a relatively new role. I am in the role because I think put in this role to put between these organizations because of I think a lot of the necessary communications and the ability to translate business speak to IT speak, as it were, was missing.
Were you in this role during this project?
No, sir.
So you just were placed in this role after the fact?
At the point where we were past the point of no return, certainly.
Okay.
I have been in this role for officially 6 months.
Is it true there have been 4 project managers
So
over
within
this?
the development team, yes, there have been 4 project managers over the course of this project.
Who did those project managers report to?
They reported to the development organization.
And the head of development is whom?
Right now, it is I would say Bill James is officially the head of the EPMO. He is actually
I don't know what
detailed-
EPO means. I don't know what that means. Who's the head
our
of development?
He is the head of our development organization.
James?
Bill James is. He is actually now detailed to be our acting principal deputy.
Got a promotion out of it. I'd call that a
Well,
promotion.
sir, I would also say that he was not in that role either when this
Okay.
this job got moved.
All right, let me just keep peeling back, because we're not going to leave here until the veterans back in my district understand what the hell's going on. Because nobody understands what's going on up here. So we're just going to keep asking. Now, that guy who's now been promoted to principal deputy is gone. Now,
No,
I mean,
sir,
he's
no,
not
sir,
gone.
You didn't understand, sir.
Okay, please help me
Okay,
understand.
well, so he has actually only been in that role for a little over a year himself.
I did understand that.
Okay.
So he's been promoted to principal deputy, but he wasn't there when this project was breaking down.
That's right.
So when I asked who was responsible, and he said project development, then I said, who's the project? So who was the project development head, director, chief executive, while this project went through 4
When this
development
got started,
managers and
it was
ultimately
back-
failed
when-
and
when I
wasted
go
$12
back-
million?
When I go back, sir, to 2015, when the original decisions were made in this, Mr. Rob Thomas was the head of the project development organization, and Ms. Nicole Mayerhauser was the deputy in that organization. Neither of them are at VA today.
Why?
One retired and one left
On their own accord?
on their own accord, yes.
Do you think they anticipated this hearing? And maybe that would...
I would not care to speculate. I do not believe that they did, but there's a lot going on.
When did they retire and resign?
Mr. Thomas left about a year and a half, about a year ago, and they both left about a year ago,
How long has this project been going on?
since 2015.
So who carried it? Who carried the ball for
So
at
I
least
would
half
say-
of the time?
So it has been passed along. If I may, sir,
You may.
I have been looking really hard at this because this bothers the heck out of me too, sir, to understand how we ended up in this path and how we diverged from things that we normally do. We normally follow a development path which we call Agile, which has a methodology where you're actually delivering capability to customers on a regular basis. You deliver a piece of it today that people use and they work, and we know it works because it's out there in the field. Then we do another piece in 2 months and another piece in 2 months after that, which I have been up to this committee and spoken to you in the past about what we're doing with education and with appeals. In both of those situations, we're following the methodology very carefully.
Whose methodology? The VA's?
The Agile methodology. This idea of delivering real things out in the field so we know that they work and they're fully tested.
Was Agile methodology not followed in this case? Is that what you're
It
telling
was
me?
not used in this case, and it is my belief that it should have been. And to me, that was the critical failure here. And instead, there was a desire that was expressed early on that we wanted to that there was a desire from the customer to deliver a fully developed, not to deploy in the field until we had a complete product, which in that has an inherent risk of, if you do not, is that because you don't have that ability to test with real users and to have pieces of functionality delivered incrementally along the way.
Is there a strong default or incentive within the VA to do projects in-house?
Actually, I would say that is changing, and I think that is a very good move to the good for us, because there has been, over time, we know that we're not the Department of Software Development. We're the Department and Maintenance. We're the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Yeah, because exactly. Seriously, we're looking at trying to figure out, this is basic management, best practice in operating any organization, and that's what are your core competencies, what's your core mission, and it's not, the VA is not qualified to be, and nor should it be involved in, to me, software development. It shouldn't be, that's not your core job. And I've seen it over and over, the failure when the VA tries to develop their own software solutions instead of taking it off the shelf. We have an off-the-shelf solution for this that 40 other VA enterprise, or states rather, have adopted. 40 states have adopted a solution for this. And meanwhile, VA's trying to do their own technology, software development. It doesn't make any sense at all. And we have just thrown away millions of dollars on account of trying to keep, in my opinion, jobs at the VA for software developers.
I would say.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I would say that the leadership over the last 2 years within OINT would agree with you as well. I mean, we have shifted to a very strong posture of buy before build. And in every project that's coming forward now, the first thing we are really incented to do is to see what products are out there in the marketplace that could fill this gap, and to only do, if there's any development that we do in-house, it's only the pieces that are truly unique to VA that no one else can do. And it may be some issues around master data management or certain things that are very narrowly scoped.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you have a different philosophical view of what VA's core mission is and what they should be doing with respect to software solutions. And it's different than the old paradigm, I'm hoping, and that's what I'm hearing.
It's pretty dramatically different.
Well, so I'm going to just, all I can do is trust and then verify through the process. Is there any senior person in the development, software development side, CIO's office, who was there through the entire project, or at least half of the project, after those two gentlemen or the people that you mentioned who retired and resigned?
I actually don't believe that there's been anybody. The turnover in OINT has been very large over the last several years. And so there really has not been anyone in a senior role that has been in the same job.
Mr. Kammerer, do you have to get permission to go out on your own to get software? Like, it must be frustrating. Could you just go out and get software because you're the leader? You know that we need IT solutions because you're stuck in 1997 with a number 2 pencil and a big chief tablet for your caseworker, your caseworkers. And can you just go out and get an IT solution yourself? Or do you have to go up the IT chain of command?
There's legal and other challenges to just being able to purchase software. So the short answer is I can't just get my own system for the counselors. It's unacceptable, as I stated, what happened. We need the system. We are working with our IT partners to address what you talked about, the managed services or managed software as a service.
But could you go out and purchase it yourself?
There's some conversation within our organization about what is feasible in terms of our legal and appropriations ability to acquire those things. I'll leave it to the expert, sir, to my right, to give you more context, but
Could he just go out and purchase a system that would help manage
So
the casework?
one piece of context is that, there is a separate IT appropriation within VA. And so things that are clearly defined as IT do go through, all approvals go through the CIO. There are good reasons for that. Not the least of which is that any solution that's published or that is purchased and or implemented, we want to ensure that from a data integrity standpoint and a data interoperability standpoint, that these systems work together and that we can aggregate information to have a holistic view of veterans. However, within that environment, particularly with our philosophy as it has been evolving to buy versus build, we encourage looking at outside solutions and using that, as long as we can assert that and assure that these solutions can be integrated within the environment, that we have the right integration between the folks on our side to make sure that it ties back in.
So I think you probably have the right answers to how it should be managed. My takeaway from my oversight hearings, this one and every hearing I've had since the first hearing in this room as a new member of Congress, is that the bureaucracy at the VA is absolutely fundamentally broken, and nowhere is it more broken than on the IT management side. It's decentralized, centralized when it's people have to. I would fire you guys as a client if I were Mr. Kammerer. I'd be disappointed because you're going to get beat up for not achieving your outcomes, or you should be if you're not, and then you've got to point over to the CIO and the ineptitude for these guys to manage a project. Mr. Kammerer, are you disappointed in your service from the IT side of VA, where you're now still stuck in 1997?
as
Just a
I
yes
stated,
or no?
I'm very disappointed we don't have a new system, Mr. Chairman.
How do you stay in this job just knowing that you aren't able to serve the veterans, the disabled veteran community that is your clientele, and you just get no help? It seems like. Do you need more resources? Yes or no?
Certainly, in the conversation we're having right now, Mr. Chairman, we need additional resources to complete this case management.
Do you need a better IT team?
The gentleman to my right and I have had more time together in the last 6 months trying to solve this challenge, and he hasn't been anything other than supportive, cooperative, and trying to get to yes so we can get some new software to our counselors, sir.
It's been a long day. We're going to close, and then I'd like to follow up with you guys separately, and I don't want to spend everybody else's time. I appreciate the other panelists, and I'm sorry to inconvenience you with the line of questions that has to do with you and your members of your organizations, but there are certainly discussions we could have outside of this committee hearing. So I ask that unanimous consent that statements for the record from the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States be submitted into the hearing record. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Finally, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material in the record of today's hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. If there's nothing further, this hearing is adjourned.